It's another Fair Folk Friday, and today we're getting into some Scottish lore. There are many mythical reasons to stay away from the sea or the loches in Scotland, but among the most particularly aggressive towards humans is the Fuath. The Fuath are amphibious creatures who have webbed hands and feet and very long claws on both of them, and are described as being extremely thin but powerful, able to drag their victims into the water and drown them from a considerable distance. They are also often described as clever, having the ability to transform into, most cases, attractive redheads for a siren-like situation. As there are both female and male Fuath, the attractive redheads apply to both genders, it not being unheard of there even being Fuath and human hybrids. They are also clever in the case that it is often said that you should not yell your dog's name at night, because the night will carry the name of your dog to the Fuath, leading the Fuath to call for both you and your dog into an ambush. Dogs and wolves being the only creatures who are said to be able to touch the creatures, as most oftentimes they are considered a water spirit and only become solid for their attacks. But in most cases, it is not random attacks that they are known for. They are said to mostly make victims of people who are either taking advantage of the land or somehow damaging it. One of the most notable reasons for their attacks are fishing during spawning season. So if you ever see what looks to be the yellow mane or tail of a horse in the water, it's probably a good idea to be on your best behavior. It's another Fairfolk Friday, and today is a warning about the darkness. There are many creatures that can hide in the darkness, but very few things can seem to envelop it. And in the Highlands, that darkness is enveloped by the Brollachan, the shapeless, entangled thing. With most fair folk, there are rules that can be followed. With the Brollachan, however, they cannot be trusted. For can you trust a shapeless child, not bound to any true laws? As the name implies, the Brollachans have no real form, only being able to see their eyes and their mouths. Often believed to be the children of the Fuath, who I've talked about before. Simply too young to be able to take form, and oftentimes speak, for they can only say either myself or thyself, you or me. It's another Fair Folk Friday, and today we're going to talk about the Fideal. So we've talked about the Fuath before. The Fideal is a very particular female one that resides in Fideal, named after her. Now the connection with the Fuath is interesting because she is very specifically the embodiment of something, particularly seen as a personification of the entangling bog grass and the water weeds of the area. Like other Fuath, it would entice men and drown them, particularly being able to have some control over the elements that she lived in. And yes, that's lived in past tense, because at least according to certain stories, while the ghost of the Fuath might haunt the place, it no longer is alive. A champion called Ewan was able to defeat the creature at the cost of his own life. However, more modern sightings at Fideal are still fairly common. Who burnt down the witch's home? That is something that we answer today on Fairfolk Friday. Now, your immediate thought might be witch hunters, which indeed existed in history. However, when it comes to folklore, it was very possible that the witch's house was burnt down by their own familiars. Would you do that to me, boy? Would you? Specifically in German folklore, one of the main identifiers of being a witch was having a small dragon-like familiar called a Drache, which directly translates to dragon, and I am probably slightly overpronouncing. It is a factor of what today we call dragon magic, and is likely one of the main inspirations of a lot of such works. Now, the Drache spirit is actually incredibly helpful, it having its own magical knowledge that it would bestow upon the witch. However, it would raise suspicion because, much like dragons in their full form in mythology, Draches specifically would steal from their neighbors anything shiny, anything valuable, and oftentimes food would be missing. However, it would be a loyal protector of the witch unless the witch itself let it go hungry, often being the perpetrator of the Fair Folk Friday, and today we're going into Spanish folklore, because we're going to talk about the Cuegle. These things are generally smaller in stature than the average, human man. However, are at least believed to be a lot stronger, being that one Coegle can take out a decent amount of humans and, sturdy livestock. They have 3 arms, but they don't seem to possess hands or fingers on them. They have 1 horn and 3 eyes. 1 eye is blue, 1 eye is green, and 1 eye is red. And the Coegle are relatively famous for stealing children out of cribs to eat them. However, there is a way to stop them. For whatever reason, they are repulsed by oak and holly leaves, so it tends to be tradition to hang those above a crib. Certain sources also give them the ability to see into the past and into the future with their eyes. Time has apparently lost all meaning to me, so I thought it was Friday. So, Fair Folk Saturday? Today we're gonna learn about the Coblynau, a type of Welsh mine fairy. And despite the cute appearance you just saw, not something you want to come across. They often live in mountain caves and freshwater wells, and that often leads to, mines being built near them. They are, however, not overly fond of miners, being responsible for a miner's lantern going out, as well as the occasional teeth mark, and they have multiple rows of very sharp teeth. They are also known for acts of mischief such as stealing miners' tools and food, and particularly being fond of eating a canary. Or if they're particularly hungry, either a pony or a person. It's also a bad idea to try to pet one, as they have quills hidden in their fur. It's another Fair Folk Friday, and today we're going into cryptid territory, you could say. Because today we're going to talk about the great giant of Ben Macdui. Ben Macdui, or Macduff's Mountain, as it is sometimes called in English, is a mountain in Scotland. And there have been many sightings of a creature that is at least 7 foot tall whenever anyone goes to the mountain. While no one ever sees the creature clearly, people can hear footsteps, hear sounds, things that just frighten them. The giant of Macduff's Mountain scares people to stay out of it, as if a tall Scottish slender man in the mist. Now, it's important to note that the mountain itself lies as the boundary between the historic counties of Aberdeenshire and Banffshire, meaning many to believe that this is a fair folk who is enforcing the boundaries between the 2 counties, perhaps enforcing a long-forgotten agreement or guarding a realm portal. It's another Fair Folk Friday! For whatever reason, werewolves have been around my page a lot, or at least have been hitting my FYP, so we're going to talk about the Faoladh. The Faoladh is one of the names heavily associated that you're going to find with Irish werewolves, and that may be something of a misnomer because none of the legends are overly associated with being limited by the moon phase, such as only being able to transform in the full moon, or weaknesses to silver or any other traditional continental European werewolf weaknesses. For the most part, they have kind of the same reputation as the wolvers in the wetlands of Scotland. They're guardians. They're usually of children, though sometimes it can be of wounded people, of just poor people in general. Depends on how the story's written. That being said, becoming a Faoladh is still considered to be a punishment, usually a curse by a sorceress or witch.